Ruth, this is an area that, there's a book on it. There's some kind of post on social media. There's lots of people that claim to be experts. And this is attachment styles, and attachment theory, which is a really important part to schema therapy. I'm Rita Union. I'm a clinical psychologist and advanced schema therapist supervisor trainer. And this is our 7-minute schemas, our busy practitioner's guide to research.
Yes, I'm Ruth Holt. I'm also a supervisor trainer in schema therapy, and we're joined today by Jerry.
Hi, Rita. Hi, Ruth. Yes, I'm Jerry Karantzis. I'm a professor of psychology at Deakin University. I head up the Science of Adult Relationships laboratory at Deakin, where we study all things relationships, and also the founder of Relationship Science Online, which is like a public outreach kind of website for information on kind of relationships, all things related to kind of couples, families, etc., dating, etc. So yeah, and I have studied adult attachment for getting close to 20 years now, ever since I started my PhD. And since then, we've had the real pleasure of being able to work in some of the major labs that study adult attachment around the world: University of California, Davis, University of Kansas, University of Minnesota, with people like, Philip Shaver and Jeffrey Simpson, and collaborators like, Omri Gillat, and many others that we've really enjoyed working with and learned a lot from. So yeah, we've landed deep in attachment.
Well, Jerry, the obvious question is, what is attachment?
Well, when we talk about, attachment is to emotionally bond with someone, but we don't just bond with anyone. We bond with people that fulfill our needs for love, comfort, and security. And it especially occurs in times when we experience great distress or threat, and other times when we experience great joy and pride and we want to share that with others. And then that dovetails into, what is an attachment style? Everyone talks about attachment styles. And in short, an attachment style is the way that we think, the way that we feel, and the way that we behave in our close relationships, whether it be our romantic relationships with best friends, whether it be with our parents. They're the kind of relationships we're talking about.
So if people, listening here, clients and clinicians thinking about therapy and schema therapy in particular, what are the kinds of core things that would be really helpful for people going through schema therapy, or clinicians trying to really connect to clients? What are the core things that they need to be thinking about when it comes to attachment and schema therapy?
Well, I guess the first thing is there a connection between attachment styles and early maladaptive schemas, right? The core kind of thoughts, beliefs that people have when it comes to the way it's discussed in schema therapy. And the answer is yes. Like Rita, myself, and Pam Pilkington did a recent review of the area, quantitative review. And what we found is that if you have an insecure attachment style, it increases the likelihood that you are going in your mind to endorse, to accept, to believe early maladaptive schemas by 2 to 3 times, versus that if you are securely attached, right? So attachment insecurity increases the risk of early maladaptive schemas and holding them by 2 to 3-fold. So what it tells us is that your attachment style is likely to play out and increase the risk of you holding these early maladaptive schemas. And your attachment style is also likely to play out on the ground in the way that you interact with a therapist and in the way you interact with your relationships around you, where you hold these early maladaptive schemas.
So, Jerry, this might be a really good time to just briefly touch on what attachment styles are, the different types. There's so much information out there. We have only got 7 minutes, but just briefly around some of the characteristics, and then we'll look at, the implications for therapy, for schema therapists in particular.
Sure. So, if we talk about attachment styles, and there are a variety of attachment styles, but let's reduce it down to the main kind of continuums that people kind of sit high or low on that affects their attachment style. The first is attachment anxiety, right? Now, if you are high on attachment anxiety, you tend to have this chronic worry around relationship partners, around close others. Those worries are around, are you loved enough by these people? So there's a high need for approval. You're kind of preoccupied or conscious of the whereabouts of them, and you have this fear of rejection around them leaving you. When there are arguments in relationships, you tend to become very upset, experience a lot of negative emotions. You may become angry and frustrated with the way that they're responding to you, that they're not doing enough for you. You may engage in some kind of guilt and manipulation to try to get them to show you more love and attention. You also tend to kind of see yourself as somewhat helpless, not as capable, and you need the help of others to do that. The other kind of main continuum that determines your attachment style is called attachment avoidance. And if you're high on attachment avoidance, then it tends to be quite the opposite. You tend to dismiss the importance of relationships. You distrust people, no matter who it may be. So there's chronic distrust. You tend to be reliant on yourself to get the job done. You see yourself as your best friend. You tend to see achievements in other parts of your life more so than investing in relationships, right? So, you tend to not really disclose your emotions too much to others. You lack a sense of intimacy with others. You're too scared to do that. So these two dimensions tend to determine your attachment style. And to say that if you're high on anxiety, then you have an anxious attachment, sometimes called preoccupied. If you're high on avoidance, you can be called, avoidantly attached, sometimes referred to as dismissing, because you dismiss the importance of relationships. And there are other attachment styles as well, but they're the two main dimensions that drive it.
So how might that play out in terms of limited reparenting? That's a really core thing for schematherapy. How would that play out? What could clinicians be aware of?
Well, let's say you had someone in the room who was high on attachment avoidance. The idea that you're going to get at the vulnerable child by trying to get them to see their own vulnerabilities and the things that they needed as a young child, you're likely to get huge resistance to that. Because someone who's high on attachment avoidance just dismisses the importance of others. They see themselves as self-reliant and super competent. So saying to them that they're vulnerable is like, kryptonite to them. All these defensive processes go up. They'll shut you down as a therapist. They'll tell you that you don't know what you're talking about. So often a way to kind of work with people who are high in avoidance, let's say in limited reparenting, is to validate their kind of reliance, their strengths, their competencies, but then also, if you're wanting to get at a vulnerable child, get them to see that vulnerability is a sign of strength. It's a sign of them healing themselves and being very capable and adult-like in achieving their kind of personal psychological goals, so to speak. So then it's not seen as a vulnerability. It's rather seen as capitalizing on their strength and their skills and their competence as such.
Well, that's really helpful for us to know. And that's our time up now. But if you'd like to hear more, if you're a clinician who would like to have more specific training on attachment and schematherapy, there's a link at the bottom of the video. And there's a link for further training for people in schematherapy.